Hey guys, glad to be back so soon. I'll give a little bit of time for people to trickle in because I am doing a catch up because I owe a lot of people super chats, which is I do very much appreciate. Uh, the it's it's largely just been a scheduling problem. Obviously, the way that the holidays work, it just is difficult to get people, during this time slot. So I've just been doing a lot of things earlier in the day, posting them later, but it makes it difficult to read supers. So this is going to function as a combination super chat catch up and Q&A session. Just watched my most or just had my most recent episode with Mr. Patriarch, which was a good time. All right. Let's see. I have 3 people watching, which is a little bit less than normal, but I guess I'll survive. And you know what? If anyone complains, I guess they already sent me their money. Remember, while this is not a business, I do like making money. So just a few things from chat. Zed Dez with a few questions. Am I on the West Coast? No, I'm on the East Coast. Late riser or burning the candle at both ends? Kind of burning the candle at both ends. I don't have to be up, crazy early, but I kind of wake up early no matter what. Said Des, don't worry about it. I'm just joking. Don't feel bad about it. But I kind of I just don't sleep that much. I kind of sleep in the 6 to 7ish hours range. Have you explained your thumbnail? Why are you holding your head? Honestly, I just had this image saved on my phone even before I had a channel. I just liked it. It kind of spoke to me, and so I when I was looking around for one, I kind of liked it because it kind of describes neatly how I feel about things. I've got some new art that consistent super chatter and friend of mine, Lou Templar, the guy who's behind a lot of the I think what is his art called? Who does he do that with? Sorry, I realize this is riveting. Oh, the Restoration Bureau. He's the guy who runs that. But let me. But he's made some new art for me, so I'll show you guys that if you want. Yeah, Paul W. Hall, it accurately depicts the Zoomer condition. I completely agree on that one. It is it's a bit grim, to put it lightly. I have the world's most unorganized desktop. Whatever. You know what? I'll show you guys the image next year when I just put it up everywhere because I can't find a way to share it cleanly. So anyway, we finally started to see some people trickle in, and I'll be monitoring chat. If there anyone has questions they want to throw my way, you don't have to pay for them. I'll just the Black Horse. You finally made me create a YouTube account to participate in this. Well, you know what? I'm honored, Black Horse. I've been enjoying our interactions on Twitter. It's been kind of fun. So anyway, going back to super chats because I owe you guys a lot of them. Really, I think. Wow, yeah, actually, I owe a lot. Okay, so from my show from an entire month ago with Black Horse. Mr. Bauer for $5 AUD. Great streams recently, much appreciated. I guess it's no longer recently, but nonetheless, I do appreciate it. Then I had a lot actually, which was very kind on the demolishing regime conservative stream, which did quite well. But I think I read all of those out live. Green Glassful sent one for $5, asking a question for Thomas. I will ask him that personally in our next episode, so know that will be addressed. I haven't forgot about it, but I've noticed it. And Machiavelli sucks to go said based, which I fully agree. Falling outside the normal moral constraints for $2 on my stream with Ryan Haywood, who is another Rod Dreher disrespecter. Another thing we have in common. He said, for your Sharps and Hankins Model 3C Pepperbox Fund. That's a little bit of an inside joke for those who don't know. I briefly went down a rabbit hole on Twitter of, just taking screenshots of expensive and cool guns on Twitter and found this whole massive auction of old timey multi-barrel percussion cap revolvers, which is extremely nerdy but extremely interesting. And Lou Templar again. And by the way, I found out that he has a Substack. I don't know how I didn't realize this, but his Substack is excellent. It's well worth your time. But for US $10 says, I'll never forget the line from Sovereign in Mass Effect. Quote, by using our technology, you develop along the paths we desire. It applies when you use the enemy's language too. Cling to your ancient tongues. I actually completely agree with that. I think that we cede a lot of ground by essentially, using the language and using the framing of our enemies. We're kind of poisoning our own well there. I fully agree. I honestly wonder, and this is Lou Templar again for US $5. I honestly wonder if we should start considering colonization. Siberia, Africa, many areas opening up as the global regime enters decline. I actually fully agree with that. I think that, the South African guys, Conscious Caracal and Robert Eigen are completely right on this. That essentially, like, there is an adventure in decline. There's kind of a way to make your own fortune. And so I fully agree with that. I don't know anything about the specifics. I know that briefly in my Telegram, there was a, fairly well thought out plan to take back Liberia by force, but I don't think that ever got off the ground. PA for $5 Australian. Enjoyed your appearance on Millennial J. Hoping to see a Walrus Luddick on the docket next year. And that was on my recent stream with Walrus, which you guys should check out. I completely agree. Luddick and Walrus are two, like, obviously I'm friends with those guys, but I also just like their podcast a lot. I think it's like many guys, kind of criminally under listened to, which I guess catches me up on background super chats. And obviously I'll let this go out for, an hour or so. So if nothing else, I will just spend this entire time talking. Paul W. Hall, pepper boxes are so ugly though. I can't disagree with you, but I find them subtly fascinating. My autismo brain just looks at it and it's like, neuron activation. There's some part like deep in my amygdala that just fires off. Black Horse, excellent stream with Mr. Patriarch. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I always enjoy, kind of like the free flowing streams. I think that I think that just personally, I do better, when it's a conversation than when it's a, kind of a more structured thing. Just because, I try to ask the questions that feel natural. And so that's easier when it is just a real conversation. It's like me talking on the phone to someone I'm interested in talking to instead of, rattling off, a series of pre-prepared questions. So I actually went through those much quicker than I thought. And you know what we'll do? Because I wanted to address this and I just didn't have the venue, is I'm going to read an article. So I've been kind of on a tear against quote unquote, regime conservatives. And it's really started, and I don't want to just go into the drama, is around a doxing, right? And I feel pretty unambiguously about doxing. I think it's scummy behavior. And what happened is that a guy, and he somewhat ironically wrote behind a pseudonym, wrote an article for the American Mind, basically justifying doxing. So, you know what? I think it's interesting. If you guys are up for it, I might do an article reading on that. Let me pull this in another window so you guys can follow along with me. So I will. All right. So this is obviously the American Mind, and the title of the article is Just Dox Theory by, of course, pseudo Justinian. Social media campaigns should respect proportionality. Conjuring up the wrath of a progressive digital swarm is analogous to launching a war. As such, doxing, if done without reference to a set of moral principles, can be a fundamentally unjust act. See, I'm going to say tacit agreeal, because the problem with doxing is that I feel like doxing as a response to like a political crime is completely unjustifiable. Like, obviously, if someone is, plotting to blow up a school bus, or plotting to destroy an orphanage, something criminal and, murderous and morally wrong, obviously that is something that they should be exposed for that, that you don't respect their anonymity. But the problem is that, realistically, right, like the political is outside of that. One of the really damaging things about Marxists, right, is that they turned ideological struggles into, life and death. That being wrong, being mistaken, was viewed as being treasonous. And obviously, right, like I'm not a liberal. I'm not, kind of like chained to, freedom of association, or not freedom, sorry, freedom of speech in like the liberal sense. But nonetheless, I think it's like a fundamentally low thing to do, to ruin someone's life because you don't like what they think, anonymously expressed on the internet. So that's my opinion. Doxing has embroiled Christian Twitter for the past 2 weeks. A friend and associate of Stephen Wolfe, author of the recently published The Case for Christian Nationalism, was doxed the day before Thanksgiving. The Fran ran a pseudonymous Twitter account that had tweeted racially offensive and vulgar tweets. As a result, he was fired from his job as the headmaster of a classical Christian school. Online commentators then pivoted towards attacking Wolfe in a successful book. And I will say, the guy's name is in here. I won't mention it, for obvious reasons. This is a fairly decent kind of like summary of it. It's difficult to say. My take on the Twitter account is that it's essentially like it's not that bad, realistically. Like if you're in our spheres, it's kind of tame. Not to say that it's like morally upstanding, but like it's not. The idea that it's a firing offense is absurd. The doxing was achieved and cheered on by people ostensibly on the same side as Wolfe and his friend. They expressed an intention to protect the national conservative movement, notice the capitalization, from white supremacist stowaways. Now, predictably, Salon, we'll open that up, informs us that Christian nationalism has a white supremacy crisis. Many conservative Christians feel angry, betrayed, and disgusted by the doxing because they had an intuitive sense of what I will make explicit here. So this is interesting, right? Because Stephen Carson, Radlib, drew my attention to a great article by Rothbard, where he essentially, and I can't remember what it's exactly talking, but he's basically talking about Jerry Falwell in the 70s. I believe it was 74 or 76. And he basically, Stephen's point was like, look, like the playbook on Christian nationalism is incredibly old. Like the way that they talk about this, like look at this brick of text, you can see all the words, right, that, are kind of like the hate words. That's essentially been going on since the 70s. And it's just an excuse. Like this isn't real shock. This isn't real disgust from them. It's manufactured, and it's manufactured to make you look bad. And this isn't a new thing. They just trot it out every 10 to 15 years, as an excuse to essentially, hit their enemies. And so that's my take on it, right? The severe consequences of a dox demand that a rigorous set of moral principles be employed before the dox is initiated. The rubric used for evaluating a just war is a natural place to start. A doxing should have a just cause, i.e. there should be sufficient evidence to substantiate the public initiation of a dox. Harsh and predictable consequences make a doxing akin to a criminal sentence, and therefore an evidentiary standard comparable to beyond a reasonable doubt seems appropriate. The person initiating the dox needs to have legitimate authority to do so, and it must involve something more than individual judgment or taste. Otherwise, the tremendous powers and consequences that follow from a dox will be wielded as vigilante power. Finally, a dox should not be done publicly if left destructive means are available, as in raising concern concerning information privately with churches, employers, don't agree with that, or other parties to whom the target is accountable. I actually don't. I don't disagree with what is set forth here explicitly. One of my main contentions was essentially that this is kind of inexcusable, to do inside of, Christian circles. I just think it's like a shitty thing to do. Black Horse, the Twitter account was bad because of how dumb it was rather than anything said. I actually completely agree with that. Like it was, and I think Dave had the right take on this, where he said it's conduct unbecoming of a Christian gentleman. It's embarrassing. Like it was not professional, but it was anonymous, and it was not evil. It was stupid. Like apologize for it and just like it'll be fine. Lady of Shalott, I'm glad to see you're here. I haven't seen you in a while. Obviously, I know that being in Australia makes things difficult, but I'm glad to see you again. It's been a while. As in a just war, the consequences of a dox must be proportional to the crime. It's insufficient to analyze the acts of doxing apart from its foreseeable consequences because those consequences vary widely. Our social regime is not interested in the doxing of Christian Trinitarian heretics or sexual libertines. In fact, many such cases, the dox victim might gain social capital as a net result of the dox. But our regime is very interested in other kinds of doxing. A racist thought or expression is akin to social death sentence, subjecting the dox target to lasting social opprobrium. I actually don't know that word. I have a decent vocabulary. Disgrace arising from opprobrium. Okay, I guess I do know that word, opprobrium. To lasting social opprobrium. As Joshua Mitchell notes in American Awakening, calling someone a racist, misogynist, homophobe, transphobe, all of those words, or any such name is cathartic. These words carry with them the power to banish or exile. So this actually ties in, with the point that Lou Templar made, in the super chats at the start of the stream, that essentially, much like words have power and technology has power, I would argue that doxing as a tool has a slant to it. Obviously, in a different cultural context, it could carry a different slant to it. But essentially, right, given our current regime, we know that the kind of people that ought to face opprobrium, to use the word that I learned on this stream, that ought to face social stigma, they will not be punished. The people who will be punished are essentially the enemies of the regime. It's what we've seen very much happen with all the like pedo stuff to happen at Twitter, right? Like that's been up forever and they didn't care because they were a client group. And much the same way, right? Like we've got to understand that, if you fall into any of these groups, in heavy scare quotes, you're the target. It's not just being a bad person by kind of like objective moral standards. It's, anti-regime, right? Our society is disproportionately harsh on people who express or tweet such forbidden thoughts. Examples from recent memory abound. Just last week, a committed college athlete lost his scholarship after a video surfaced showing him singing the words to a popular rap song. Many such cases. The case at hand is instructive as well. After last week's doxing, a Christian Twitter mob tried to cancel a crowdfunding campaign meant to defray the dox target's job loss. Sorry, that's an incredibly dark tongue twister there. Signaling their position that his family should not be able to eat. Then Dreyer, blogging about Wolf's friend, analogized the situation to the Catholic sex abuse scandal. The mob claimed that Wolf had a duty to publicly denounce and condemn his friend. Indeed, the reaction to a racial slur carries approximately the same social stigma as an act of pedophilia. Is this just? Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Moreover, the catastrophic consequence of a dox reach well beyond the individual target. The target's family, employer, and other associates and friends are permanently harmed. Broader mimetic dynamics are unleashed that cannot easily be combined or controlled. A hostile, biased regime is invited to adjudicate and mete out sentencing, and the resulting furor creates collateral damage for allies by providing ammunition for leftists to use against all right-wingers. Moreover, as one suit explains, the resulting guilt is easily weaponized by the left to extract concessions and compromises from institutions, particularly Christian ones. I completely agree with that. Extracting admissions of guilt from your political opponents enables you to demand that they act in a chastened and deferential subjection to you as moral arbiter. Almost everyone is playing the game. Many evangelical Christians are excessively nice people, whose form of faith is itself profoundly oriented around their scrupulous and overactive conscience. Who wrote this? Okay, I actually haven't read this then. Excuse me. They are also naive and don't understand that they are perfect marks for this game. They can easily be gaslit. Tell them that they are complicit in the worst atrocities, and it's highly likely that they will accept your claims. Their instinctive response, as nice, conformist, conflict-averse, and obliging people, when faced with accusations by a person of color, is deference, affirmation, and contrition. Critical assessment of the often largely unfounded accusations being made is suspended. Again, I completely agree. That's well said. And essentially, my big objection here, and actually, this is a very reasonable article. I think that, I may have been a little bit hasty in reading this the first time. But my problem with this is that it presents doxing as kind of like an act in war. And to me, I view it as just an act of base treachery. It's not it's not the same as a technology like a bomb or a gun. It's just terrible, bad behavior, and I almost view it as completely unacceptable, almost regardless of context. Revealing someone's personal identity like this serves no real positive purpose. And so this is probably like my last like statement on this. To me, at least, like the conversation around doxing just needs to die. Like there's nothing more to be taken from it. It really is just like kind of like the inexcusable moral act on the internet for very good reason. Anyway, going back through it, I'm trying to see how much left. Did I miss drama? Not really. Just going back through an article because I want to, actually have the stream have some type of content to it. I promised guys that I'd go back through their super chats. I did that at the start, and I was kind of giving their time to be more, questions in the AMA. Lady of Schlott finished homeschooling for the year. Oh, good. I'm glad. Obviously, I'm a homeschooling graduate myself. Well, not really graduate. I was, through elementary school. And it was good for me. It's probably a big reason I ended up here. Excuse me, guys. All right. The whole doxing thing is so tiresome. There's no excuse for throwing your own to the wolves. Calling someone racist publicly is asking the regime to hit them. I actually completely agree. And that's really the thing that's so like shitty about it is that, and sorry, I don't know why I've been swearing more recently. I need to cut back on that. Excuse me. I've been talking too long. It is that essentially it's not, I don't view it as a morally neutral tactic. I view it as almost exclusively just an abject evil, because you essentially are combining something that someone deliberately made separate, because the way that all of us act, online is deliberately separate from who we are in real life in many cases. And obviously that there are bad sides to that, but one of the good ones is that you can essentially play with ideas, talk to people, express things that you can't in real life. And the point of that is not to just endlessly spin your reels on the internet. The point of that is that like you're trying to accomplish something, you're trying to learn something. But breaking down that kind of barrier, you're taking this from a, space to develop ideas and just turning into another extension of kind of like the social sphere of, controlled by like evil progressives. And I just have no patience for that. The man that passes the sentence should swing the sword. Well said. I completely agree that there's another part of it that it's very much kind of like the liberal attitude towards prison, where it's like, oh, well, I didn't kill them. I didn't sentence them to death. So what do I care if they get, thrown down the stairs or, essentially have a miserable, horrible existence for 80 years before they finally expire. I didn't actually do it, so it's fine. And I have, no patience for that. What are your top 3 values in rank order and why? Mine are survival, genetic, then truth, then liberty. See, that's a really difficult question. I mean that sincerely because it's what do you value like that? I would guess I probably, because if you have kind of like a Christian, version of things, that I guess I would have to rank truth at the highest in kind of like a theological sense, right? Because man's chief end is essentially to like align themselves with God, with the nature of reality. I put that first. I'm sorry, that's a difficult question, especially on the spot like that. Sorry, I keep muting myself because I've been struck with a coughing fit. Let's drop 3. You know what, James Babcock? I will come back to that. I would say truth first. Then I would. Wow, that's a really difficult question. And I'm not. I mean, in my defense, I feel like that's quite something to have. The rank ordering and the 3 like most important things in your life are quite difficult. But I'll put truth up top, and I will bank that and come back to it. Doxing etiquette can't be enforced when it's fed and NGOs and face fags doing doxing. I completely agree. It's also asymmetrical. one of the things that we've seen with the recent, Twitter disaster, with all the journos, essentially losing their accounts, is that these are never fair engagements, and pretending like this is a contest between equals is useful to a lot of people on both the right and left, but it's fundamentally a mistake. Yevsey for Canadian, get entropy. Yeah, I should. But you know what? I really have no good excuse on that one again. Survival cannot be your highest value if nothing worth dying for, you have nothing worth living for. Black Horse, I completely agree with that. It's funny. I've kind of jokingly called myself like the least original person on the right wing, and it's essentially because I'm very much still in like the gathering stage as far as ideas come. And so when it comes to people like, Black Horse and Dave, these guys that I, share a lot of, I have a lot of agreement with, it's kind of feeling like, there's this almost like vortex of like ideas kind of like circling back around. And so that's something I completely agree with. I tie myself to that. Because again, like it goes back to that idea of like whatever your top value in that rank order is, that's essentially what you worship. And if you worship, your genetic line above all else, it's like, well, that's the idea that your genetic line is above reproach, that you can't criticize it, which I think is, completely wrong, right? Like obviously like patrimony, having something to pass on to your children is incredibly important. It's a big part of the reason that so many of us and so many of our friends are dissatisfied with the regime as it is, but nonetheless, right? Like it's not an endless good. And I think really it's part of the reason I do get fed up with, kind of like the pagan types, is that they try to push Christians into these like increasingly more and more unlikely situations where it's like, well, if it came down to it, you have a rope in each hand, and on one of them is the concept of Christianity and the other one is the white race, and you can only pull one of them, kind of in a Spider-Man situation, if you see what I'm getting at. And it's just kind of unrealistic, because on one hand it's theoretical, I get the point, but like to me at least, right, like I see the hierarchy of goods, right, like the ever, kind of like ever increasing importance, they all point in the same direction. Like there are very few situations in which doing the right thing in relation to God will not be the best thing for your family. There obviously are cases, but they're kind of vanishingly rare, especially at kind of like a existential level. I don't know. I could be wrong, but to me at least, I don't see those things as necessarily in conflict. Machiavelli sucks to go. I see what you're saying. I cannot read that because I do like my channel. One of the things that I have been going through, and this is something that I'll probably have Luth Templar on to discuss, is I've been reading the Chinese sci-fi series, the Three Body series. And it's interesting because when I was talking to Haywood, I mentioned the idea that essentially sci-fi kind of needed the Cold War. And before reading this book, I would have said that fully and completely. But this is actually probably the only truly interesting sci-fi written after the Cold War. It was written in the mid-2000s. And it's quite good. I'd really recommend it to all of you guys. There's a lot in it. It's a profoundly anti-democratic book, which I think is kind of interesting because it kind of challenges the core like Star Trek assumptions of sci-fi. So much so that like Star Trek civilization is actually a stage, in kind of like the middle of this story that is overcome, kind of explicitly, which I don't know. I think that's, that's kind of an interesting thing that tendency is deliberately addressed and kind of over it is deconstructed, but not in kind of a subversive sense. And it has a seal of approval from a very like progressive friend of mine who I was talking to about this. And he said, and I quote, "I don't like that book. It made me uncomfortable and scared because it didn't seem like democracy was the author's, end goal." And I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but I was like, what? That's an unintentionally great review, great endorsement of this book. Oh, sorry guys, as I'm sure you can tell, my voice is getting hammered. I've been talking. I've been talking all day, both to you guys. And all right, if I don't see any more explicit questions, I have not seen this work. All right, never mind. I guess you don't believe in evolution if you don't put survival first. I completely disagree with that. I don't really see the conflict again. Like I have no problem with evolution. It seems like it makes sense, but I don't believe that just continued existence is the end goal. Asking Christians to rank order their values is like a trick question for them because they don't have values outside of God's will for them. I mean, I guess it just takes the top rank order value off the table, but like within that, there's an incredible breadth and depth to like, well, how do you apply these principles, right? Because obviously Christians have disagreed vehemently. It's kind of what we're kind of infamous for, and so I guess I fundamentally disagree with that. Again, you're kind of seeing me at a diminished state. I've been, it's practically midnight here, and my brain is kind of fried. Doug Dimmadome, if y'all were to recommend a good book for getting up to date on the current philosophy of the DR, what would y'all Cowboys recommend? One that the DR is like so many people at once, so it's very difficult, to say like what does the DR believe, because it essentially all it does is spend its entire time fighting about how it's not a group and how half of the people in the group are either federal agents or not really on the right. But if you want to kind of get a really quick catch up, AA's book, The Populist Delusion, is quite readable and is a good way to kind of like catch up to the conversation. If you want to go slightly further back to kind of like the start of this, I would recommend just going back and reading Moldbug. Moldbug is not to everyone's taste. His prose is a little bit unwieldy, to put it nicely, but there's a lot of ideas specifically in his book, How Dawkins Got Pwned, which again, just the title alone will tell you, what to expect. And then Open Letter to an Open-Minded Progressive, that will kind of give you the, I guess, like a primer, and kind of like the crack from which this, this movement kind of sprang. So those are always my two. I realized that Moldbug is a little bit more out of date, because he was writing in the mid 2000s, but nonetheless, those are kind of the two things off the top of my head. I would also, and thank you, Zeddes, for reminding me, I'd also recommend Burnham. The Managerial Revolution and Burnham is summarized in AA's book. So maybe I would read AA's book first, just as a summary, to then, kind of parlay that into, into a specific reading of each of the authors he summarizes. But I guess that's my best answer. B. Alder, I would love to talk to you and meet you. I'm from Indiana. How do I reach out? Well, linked on almost all of my videos, not this one, because I was very lazy and did not make a thumbnail or a description because I had 5 minutes between my last video and this one. You can kind of click those and either drop into my Telegram, which is on my link tree, or just DM me on Twitter. I am an internet addict, so I'm relatively easy to reach on either of those channels. Again, sorry guys, I know my voice is giving out. You're not getting the same dulcet tones that you can normally count on. But I did feel like I owed it to you guys to get those supers out, because obviously, like, you paid me for a service, and I'm going to get it back to you. Yeah, it's been, and I guess this is kind of like my eternal role is kind of following slightly behind the Discord, but I am getting kind of frustrated on certain conversations, like, with very few exceptions. If the conversation is about Christianity versus paganism, sex and dating, or anything with the word particularism in it, I think it is bad, and I don't like listening to it. No complaint on the guys doing it, but just those conversations seem so like non-productive past a certain point. Like, to me, right, I think that there are very real differences on the right. There are certain avenues that really need to be explored. So, for instance, our relationship with technology, that one needs to be explored. I think that the Nietzschean versus Christian version of things, that's difficult to bridge. Like both of those are kind of core axes that must be examined. But a lot of the more niche stuff is, I think, largely a waste of time. And I think that, people like, Semi-Agog have drawn attention to the fact that, like, look at the people who are always stirring stuff up. Like, look at the people who are always, I guess, like trying to start non-productive conversations, and just stop giving them the time of day. Like the people encouraging raiding, the people encouraging all of that. Like, just stop wasting your time with them. And I won't name names because I genuinely try not to start it in my own terms. That's kind of my advice. Ben Alder. Oh, thank you. I saw your super chat. You don't need to pay me. Like, you can just reach out. I answer almost all my DMs. But anyway, guys, my voice is giving out. So I'm going to consider this kind of a last call. And by the way, to ask a question, you can just drop it in chat. There's only 25 of you guys, so I can kind of keep up with it. But consider this a last call because I am obviously I am starting to flag. My voice is giving out. All right, I'll give that a little bit of time to percolate. Oh, Doug Dimmadon's about to sound sorry. Mint tea should help that throat. Yeah, I know. My throat is not even sore necessarily. It's just overused. I had to. This is the most like uninteresting thing possible. But I had to go to the fiance's work Christmas party, and got to meet some absolute specialists because the kind of person that is a public school teacher varies, and some of them are very odd people. And so I had to talk to a local weatherman about how he got fired from his last job for being a bad weatherman, which again, I would have said, I don't know, man, just look at Apple weather and you're probably pretty close. And he didn't think that was as funny as I did. All right. Haven't seen any other questions. So I think I'm going to start to wrap things up. Again, guys, thanks for coming out to this very impromptu stream. I just needed to, accomplish certain things and get that off its chest. But anyway, guys, thanks for coming out. I really do appreciate it. And there should be some more content, some more real planned episodes instead of this slapped together disaster. But all right, guys, it is now midnight here, and I'm going to wrap things up. But thanks for coming out, guys. I appreciate it. Good night. Oh, Doug Dib. I'm Doug Dib. I'm not asking that. That's stupid. Good night.